Well, I show you the plant so that you don't see me point towards the cell phone and turning on this video or turning it off. So you start with this, end with that, and hopefully you don't have a chance to see my hand move. Rebel Geologist, the name I stole from George Gammon, whom I admire. He's the rebel capitalist. And I'm a libertarian, as you will notice in my post. And I am also a very enthusiastic geologist. And I'm an old guy. I've been around for 40, 50 years in the oil industry. I'm going to take my glasses off so that you can enjoy my squinty eyes. Because I see the cell phone better with the glasses off than with them on. That's how old I am. And I need to lubricate my voice, otherwise it gets too squeaky. With ice water, and not like Mr. Adams, because I drink normally 10 cups of coffee or more, including some cappuccinos every day. That's not very good for my voice. So, what is Rebel Geologist all about? Well, it's about geology. I am still very enthusiastic about it, and I try to show young petroleum professionals about the career that they're going to enter. So I'm talking about reservoir geology. And 40 years ago or so, when I was working for a Canadian petroleum company, I was asked to teach engineers about geology so that we could better cross-communicate. And about 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, as a consultant, I created Geology for Engineer as a course to the industry. And let me start by saying that I think that oil, gas, hydrogeology have still an incredibly good future ahead. For at least another decade, if not much longer. And if there is a threat that oil and gas becomes obsolete, as some people like to think, I don't think that will happen before we actually running out of affordable oil and gas and other forms of fossil energy. So this is not a sunset industry. Oil and gas, energy, will always be an essential part of our society. Make no mistake that electric cars and electricity will replace oil and gas. It won't. And the reason is simple. Because electricity is not a form of energy, it's a carrier of energy. And to generate oil and gas, we need forms of primary energy, such as flowing water, hydro, such as uranium, such as solar energy, such as wind, but also such as coal, such as gas and oil. And there is no way that we will generate the enormous amount of energies needed for society to prosper at an affordable price, that we will, at least not for another century, not give up on oil and gas. I'm sorry, that's the reality. And you may be all concerned about CO2, but even to generate all that electricity, you will still need a lot of oil and gas. And that's why I'm teaching this course, to show you that we are not robber barons and that there's a whole lot of science that goes into finding oil and gas, and that you shouldn't speak too lightly about it. Because I think before this century is over, we are running out of affordable oil and gas, rather than that solar or hydro will replace it. It doesn't have the capacity. We need other sources, probably uranium. I have high hopes for geothermal, although it is right now in its infancy. So I'm going to talk about Earth, because that is what geology is about. And make no mistake, most geologists love being outdoors. We did nothing but in our first years as young geologists or geology students. I did my fieldworks, as they call them, for several summers during many years in Europe, in Germany. I did it in Italy. I did it in France, even a short stint in Belgium, and in the Spanish Pyrenees. So don't tell me we don't love nature. We do. It was one of the reasons that I went into geology. And that is the reason for many geologists to go into this profession. And most of us are more than aware about how this world was formed and how beautiful it is. So don't think for a second that we are there to destroy this earth. To the opposite. And we are there to provide affordable energy and other resources such as gold, silver, nickel, copper, right? For the benefit of society. And that is how we make our living. 4.5 billion years ago, if you remember from the Big Bang show, that's when this planet was formed. And if you look on a clock, a one-day clock, scaled for start to start at 0 hours, 4.5 billion years ago, and you go back towards human existence, one of the first things you will notice is that us little humans are only here on this planet in the last few seconds of the 12-hour clock. Earth has evolved from a hot planet to what we are today. And it was one incredible path of evolution. Not only for the cellular, one-cell critters that we started out with that may have lived around volcanic vents on the bottom of the ocean and that have similar DNA than you and me today. There's no way that there were some aliens that planted our DNA on this earth and 7 weeks or days later we were evolved to what we call Homo sapiens. Our history goes back 4.5 billion years. And you may be religious and believe in creationism and in 7 days creation. I don't want to be offensive, but maybe then geology is not the science for you, unless you can make the 7 days in very, very, very long-lasting days. 7 very, very, very long-lasting days to end up at today's planet. So with that out of the way, 4.5 billion years ago, there was not much of an atmosphere. There was not much of land. There was not much of an ocean crust. We started out as a hot ball of molten materials, molten rock, you may say. And it behaved a little bit like a pot of boiling milk. You know, if you have a pot of boiling milk on your fire, on your stove or your on your stove, then you can see that after a while there is a skim developing on top of the milk. And that skim cools off when it flows or moves on the surface of the milk. It gets heavier than the surrounding boiling milk and sinks towards the bottom of the pot. While it sinks, it heats up again, and then it stops sinking and moves along the bottom of the pot until it heats up enough that it gets lighter than the surrounding boiling milk. And it goes back to the surface, up. And when it reaches the top of the surface, it cools off and forms a skim. And it floats for a while along the surface until it gets cold enough and heavy enough to start sinking again. So we're getting those what we call convection currents. And that is the beginning of how crust evolved on this planet. Okay, if you want to know more, because it's a long enough video by now, then please subscribe or just watch my quirky videos.